Welcome to Odyssey, the platform. And today our special event is all about mindfulness, because at Odyssey, we like to cross over the different modalities. We like to look at some would call it woo-woo, I'd call it energy fields, being a psychic medium. And then we're going to introduce Theo, who will be joining us. And he's a mindfulness practitioner, and he will be joining us. So he will be doing quite a few events looking at mindfulness and how we can, thank you, focus our minds. And there's my mind just going off there as well. So my guy just said, focus your mind. And I went, okay, fine. So Theo, would you like to say hi so everyone can sort of see you on video and everything?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you all. Yeah, it's great to be here. Excited to get into the talk. Uh, and yeah, thanks for going easy on me.
We'll try, Theo. I can't promise you that. My guides can be a little bit blunt at times. So those who worked with me before or been in my audience totally understand that sometimes a guide might come in and sort of ask you a question. I wasn't expecting that, but who knows? We'll see how we go. So one of the things that's been coming up for me right now, I'm training a lot of individuals about looking at working with energy, looking about extending themselves, knowing that they just aren't what they see or feel. They're not just a regular, well, they are the regular human being, but we're more than that on the planet right now. And more of us are moving out of the 3D world of the 9 to 5 job and thinking that's how life should be. And the work that we're doing through Odyssey and through myself and a number of the practitioners that we have on board through Odyssey, you know, from the therapists to people talking about human design, to numerology, to colorology, you name it. We're bringing on a number of modalities so that they can cross over, so that people can understand there's more than one thing in life that will help them. And one of the things I found in the past for myself has been mindfulness. And so we're bringing on board Theo, so he will work with individuals. And with the mindfulness, it's just really to center ourselves. But I'm going to not do all that. I'm going to leave that to Theo, our expert. Sorry, I've heard somebody else came in then, another guide. Like, why are you here? So I think there's support for you, Theo. So there might be a family member popping in here. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not working as a psychic tonight. Anyway, so it is about looking at how people can center the energy, because if people can center their energy and using mindfulness, they said, what happens is then you can go on to change how you come across in your world, how you bring forward different energy in your world, and also to center yourself. So for those who are looking at doing energy work anyway, this is going to be a great place to start. But for people that are going through, you know, anxiety or major shifts in their lives and changes and things coming up for them, mindfulness is a great practice. So I'm going to hand it over to Theo to give us a bit of information about, you know, about mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It sounds interesting. So let's have a little look. What have you got, Theo?
Yeah, so I don't know how familiar you guys are with mindfulness, but in its very basic sense, essentially when you're practicing mindfulness, you're doing less. You're kind of practicing paying attention to the present moment with purpose, right? So you're doing it on purpose. And crucially, you're doing that without judgment. Um, so it's an innate human ability, right? Every time you are tuned in to your current experience, you are being mindful. So when you are listening to me talk right now, if your mind hasn't wandered away, you're being mindful. When you're like tasting the food that you're eating, you're being mindful, right? So it's an innate ability. Um, the thing is, it's so hard to be mindful because our brain has a limited amount of capacity to kind of notice and experience too many things at once. So when we go through our daily life and we have all of these different things that are kind of grabbing our attention, we move away from the present moment and our current experience. So we might be thinking about, I'm hungry, and you start imagining what you're going to eat for dinner, right? So in that moment, you're not being mindful. So when we practice mindfulness, we're, like I said, practicing just observing your direct experience without judging it. Um, the reason why it seems so simple, but the reason why that is so or can be so beneficial is because essentially you start to develop a greater awareness. So the more you observe your experience, the more you start to learn things and notice things about everything outside of yourself, but really about yourself as well. it's kind of crazy how much you can learn about yourself by just observing yourself, listening to yourself for 2, 3 minutes. There's always something more you can learn. Um, and with that greater awareness, you kind of get this zoomed out perspective, right? So now when you feel that anxiety or you feel this intense emotion that usually when it comes around is really hard to deal with, you can zoom out from that and you can kind of see the start and you can see the end, and it's much easier to deal with. So that's kind of like a really like simplified version of how mindfulness can really help in terms of managing emotions. Um, but yeah, I think the key kind of benefit that you get from practicing mindfulness and being more mindful in your day to day is that kind of awareness. And I guess it's kind of it's sort of like a wisdom, but that sounds very like ooh, like wisdom, but it is a bit of a wisdom.
Hang on a minute, that you're on the right channel for that.
Okay.
But what I like what you said, it's like it is like training the brain because in the world that we live in right now, it's changed. We're quick to sort of quickly sort of look at the phone. We can get distracted really quickly. That we get distracted by all sort of things that are going on in our world. So, like as you were saying, by learning sort of mindfulness, that helps us, doesn't it, in the way that we train our brain to sort of learn to focus on things, which is amazing, which is such a great skill to have, like you were saying, because
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So, the more you practice, being the kind of like phrase that everyone loves at the moment, being in the present moment, um, the more you are literally experiencing everything around you, right? And what that does is it makes your it makes your life much richer. So you're much more engaged with the things that are directly happening to you right now. So um, that has huge benefits as well when you practice mindfulness for a long time, or maybe not even for a long time for some people. Your life can become so much more colorful. And what that does is it makes the other things like social media, if people here use social media or other things that are really fun and really addictive, those things become a little bit less attractive. You can kind of weigh up much more easily, okay, actually, how much is this thing serving me? How much is this thing helping me move towards the kind of person I want to be or live the life that I want to live? Because everything else is so much richer, it's not such an attractive pull. And you have a lot more, I would say, like empowerment to kind of choose what you do with your time and where you focus your attention.
And I like that because that was one of the things, teaching individual students or teaching classes, that the thing is sometimes when you ask people to go into meditation, their mind can wander off because they've got everyday life situations going on. You can get distracted. And so the idea is that if you're more mindful, that you're also acknowledging those emotions and feelings that you're actually going through at any particular time. And like what you were saying, because sometimes people can get distracted and don't realize actually how unhappy they are, or actually they forget that they're living in that sorrow state and forget that they need to come out of that, because some states or some emotions can be quite addictive, but you just don't realize the difference or what's going on. So I mean, they just said to me, it's from the moment that individuals wake up, even in the morning, that it makes a big difference how even just reaching for their phone, because they're not being mindful, they're already allowing their brain to sort of scan off and look at other things that's going on. So if we look at the brain, because they're sort of saying, we were talking about this just a little bit beforehand about, do we know what's going on with the brain? Like when we're going off, we'll scatter brain, and then, or when we're being mindful, do you know about the differences?
Yeah, I mean, so if we get like a little bit technical for a bit, there is some research. There's a great book actually, which is called The Science of Meditation. The American version is called Altered Traits. So I don't know, maybe I'll pop the book in the chat at the end so you guys can take a look if you're interested. It talks in depth about all of the kind of neurological changes that happen when you practice mindfulness for a long time. They put all these kind of Zen masters in the scanning machine and they scan their brain. And what they found is, so there's an area of the brain called the default mode network, which is kind of aptly named because it's whirring away when we are not doing or thinking about anything else. So when you're sitting on the bus waiting to go home, or you're standing in line in Morrison's or whatever, default mode network's going and you're imagining all sorts of things, you're daydreaming, you're maybe ruminating about something that you did or said. So when we practice mindfulness more and more, there's actually changes so that the default mode network becomes less active. So we have less of a tendency to just for our mind to just wander into this kind of like self. I use the word self-centered in a very literal sense, not in like a negative sense, but the self-centered imagination where we're always imagining like the things that we did that we're embarrassed about, or what we're going to do in the future. So we kind of naturally move away from that tendency, and you are naturally more present in that way.
Yeah, because there was something that also there was something we was having a conversation a little bit earlier about the brain can't tell the difference between, an actual situation happening where we're actually presently either being chased by a tiger or whatever, or a worry that we're thinking about, that's something anxious or like anxiety, something moving in the future, what we could be worried about. Or actually, we might be something looking back at something that's happened in the past to us. So the brain can't tell the difference. I was just saying to you a little bit before we started the session actually about somebody feeling the adrenaline or feeling scared, or how to transmute that into feeling actually it's quite exciting. But part of the brain, sorry, a part of the brain that it's about us instructing the brain to sort of say, actually, this could be a feeling. Instead of being scared, it could actually be, I'm excited. And then you told me a beautiful thing about butterflies. Can you tell everybody what we were saying?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly as you're saying, you can kind of step back from your emotions and kind of like to imagine it as when you're not being so mindful and you're having quite an intense emotional experience, maybe you only have kind of like three or four pieces of a puzzle and it looks a certain way. Whereas when you kind of practice that observation with non-judgment, you step back, a few more pieces come into the puzzle, and maybe the picture changes entirely. So we were talking about butterflies, and I heard this really nice kind of saying, which is that you're not going to get rid of your butterflies, but you can get them to fly in formation. So rather than this kind of like scattered anxiety before something that's a bit scary, you can almost like channel your energy, if you like, to serve you. And again, that comes from a kind of like acceptance element as well, right? The idea that you're not trying to reject your butterflies, because ultimately your brain's doing exactly what it's evolved over millions of years to do. It's protecting you, it's making you feel a bit kind of jittery before something that matters, so that you do it well. So we don't want to reject that, but we want to kind of use that.
Okay, and they've just said to me, one of my guys has sort of said, what are the health benefits of this? The health to the body and the mind, because they somehow they're linked together. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, there's there's lots of health benefits associated with mindfulness in terms of like slowing the heart rate, lowering the blood pressure, which are two measures which are really important for like longevity. And basically that is just a function of breathing. When you practice mindfulness, the staple kind of practice that is embedded in most formal practices, it's just breathing, and you naturally breathe a bit slower, a bit more deeply. And as you do that more and more, you kind of relax, tension releases, and if you're doing that regularly over long periods of time, your blood pressure is going to lower, your heart rate is going to lower, and that is massively linked to greater longevity. Um, Equally, you can use mindfulness to deal with pain. So I don't know if anyone here has heard of John Kabat-Zinn, but he's
Yeah.
kind of like John Kabat-Zinn,
Yeah.
and he's kind of like the father of Western mindfulness, if you like. And he actually started out as a doctor, and he developed a program called mindfulness-based stress reduction for his patients who were experiencing chronic pain. So this was I think it was in the 80s. It was a while ago, maybe the early 90s. But anyway, he found that just getting his patients who are experiencing this chronic pain for months or years to practice mindfulness, after about 8 weeks, their pain symptoms were massively improved. Um, and so the research now and what common thought is now is that you change your relationship with pain when you start to understand your body in a different way and your experience in a different way. So, for example, when you're looking at your experience non-judgmentally, you're kind of creating that space between the input and then how your brain formulates what that is and tells you what that is, right? So if you think about fire, we would all say that fire is painful, but actually fire is hot. Your brain creates that heat into pain. So when you practice mindfulness regularly, you create that space and that space gets bigger and bigger. And I don't, you know, I don't think that you can ever get to a point where you don't feel pain. I think, that's potentially harmful. But you can massively change your relationship with pain. And mindfulness is a prescribed treatment for people suffering from chronic pain today that came out of that John Kabat-Zinn initiative. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that when they use the mindfulness and the techniques they use when they do walking over the coals, of course, as you're correct in saying that you want to have some sensations of some pain to protect yourself. You don't want to lose that
Yeah.
tone, so that makes sense. But I'm sitting here talking to you, there's sort of also, okay, thank you. They said about a relationship with the body and the mind. So it's about building the relationship. I'm not saying that your body's letting you down. So very much about how your mind might interpret a situation, your body's not letting you down, there's things that's going on, so there's a way that you can help to heal the body, and part of mindfulness can be used. They also just said to me, there's something about, you were talking about the breath as in within the mindfulness, there's something about it changes, thank you, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but they sort of said change the balance of the oxygen levels or the gases within the body as well, they're talking about. So they're talking about them, that affects the individual organs in the body as well. So this is what they just said. I don't know if you know information about that, I'm not sure, but this is what they just turned around and said to me, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when you're breathing more calmly and deeply and smoothly, particularly when you're breathing in through the nose, which is like commonly instructed, you are breathing more efficiently. So that means that you're taking in, or you're not taking in more oxygen, but you're absorbing more oxygen per breath when you're breathing more slowly and more calmly. So as you get better at doing the kind of breathing exercises that are so intrinsic to mindfulness, yeah, you will naturally start using oxygen more efficiently, and your muscles and organs will have a better supply.
Okay, they love that. They love that explanation of what you just said. I love that. Because they were saying, they just said about, because we're gonna look at what people can, how they can use mindfulness. That's the best thing. Oh, their daily things they can use to bring it in to try for themselves. But they also said, things like, if people are having anxiety or panic attacks, which some people are feeling on the planet right now, because there's a lot going on with individuals. There's mindfulness is a great technique to use for those, helping individuals who have, panic attacks or whatever it is. Thank you. I want to say, is that true? Because that's what I'm hearing from my guys. Theo, what do you think? How does that sound?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. Yeah. You can definitely use mindfulness, or I mean, I say use mindfulness. I kind of want to get away from that. You can be mindful, I think is a better
Yeah,
way
that's
of
much better.
practice mindfulness. Um, when you are having a panic attack, if you I mean that might be incredibly difficult, but if you can, because obviously a panic attack is when you're, as you said before, Anne, when your brain is not is acting as if something that is happening that is much more dangerous than what's actually happening, right?
Yeah,
Your brain is kind of like all systems are go, like alarm bells are ringing. Maybe you'll either get out of the situation you're in, you'll freak out, maybe get violent, or you'll completely freeze if it's really bad.
yeah.
Um, but actually you might not be in a situation that requires that behavioral response. So if you are able to practice mindfulness in that moment, which I think would take quite a high level, but if you practice enough, you'll get there.
Practice,
Um,
practice, I just said.
exactly. That's it. It's all about the practice. Then you can connect to your body, right? Which is something that is always physically grounded. So if you are just in sitting in a cafe and you're having a panic attack and there is no immediate danger around you, if you connect to your body and you kind of have that physical grounding, right, to the physical world, that can be massively calming. And you might then be able to start doing the breathing techniques or whatever it, hopefully that you have some in your tool set, and get yourself out of there. But
And
also,
that's, and
oh,
that's
sorry.
what it is. Sorry, they said that's what it is. And they said, yeah, getting out of your head. They said for people to, there are too many people getting in their head. Get out your head. When you said sit and to be grounded, they said you're correct in the sense of by placing your physical body on a seat and feeling your actual physical body in your seat, the muscles, the legs, whatever. Sorry, they interrupted. Carry on, Thea.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's like you always have control over your physical body, no matter what your mind is doing. So your mind can be going a million miles an hour, but you can find the choice to, move your physical body in the way that you need to in that moment. And that can be really calming. But I was going to say the other way in which mindfulness can really help with panic attacks in particular is, and there's research on this, people who experience panic attacks and were given a mindfulness like treatment over a few weeks, they started to basically be aware of the signs that their panic attack was coming on earlier. So before they actually descended down into full-on panic, they were able to do something about it. And that comes back to just that greater awareness of what's happening within you and around you. So that's another way in which it can really help with panic attacks for sure.
I love that. I mean, literally, the reason I came across mindfulness was literally because I had panic attacks after my accident that happened so long ago. So it was about learning about the mindfulness. And that's when I came across all those names. But okay, thinking they said, I'm just going to throw this randomly in because this is what they just said, and I'm listening to them. They're talking about animals are great. So if you are somebody who has panic attacks, and also about being mindful, animals are brilliant because if you feel like you can't breathe, if you like, now what they said, if you have a dog by you and you're having a panic attack, by actually just being aware of their breath, placing your hand on the body of the animal, you'll feel the breath going in and out, and you are then to sort of mimic that and follow that breath. And I just said to them, hang on a minute, not everyone's got a dog or a cat hanging around. They might have a goldfish. How are you going to manage that? It's like, do you put your hand into the fish bowl? It's like crazy. So yes, I think your technique would be a good idea to bring them back to wherever they are, the location. If they're in a supermarket. That was one of my things when I was in a supermarket. I didn't want to wait in a queue. I'd automatically think, oh, my lungs going to collapse when I went through the other experience I had. And I'd stand there and I couldn't breathe. And I learned that, as you were saying a little while ago, you learn the symptoms or the signs that you're going to have a panic attack, and you try to talk yourself down. It's like a fire alarm going off inside. So for me, it was like hands got sweaty, started feeling a little bit, I couldn't breathe. I knew I could breathe. I had to start talking to myself and say, yes, you can breathe. Your lungs are working. But again, the head was elsewhere. So it's a great technique. So if we look at how can people apply some daily routines or rituals in their life about mindfulness, what is some of the simple tips they can try while that they're listening to you right now? What is it that you can offer them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of understand the difference at this point between formal mindfulness practice and informal mindfulness practice. So formal mindfulness practice, we would say, is like when you are setting aside time, sorry, to dedicate to practice being mindful and you're not doing anything else, right? And this is a time where you might usually be doing something else. That sounds kind of weird, but it will make sense. So an example of that is a mindfulness meditation. So you sit down, maybe you close your eyes, or maybe you're standing up, but you're dedicating that time to meditate mindfully. So that's formal practice. Informal practice is when you are practicing being mindful, but whilst you're doing something that you would usually be doing anyway. So um, it's really important to do a mixture of both. The informal practices that I think are really good, if you find something that you do every day without fail. So, for example, brushing your teeth. Hopefully, everyone here brushes their teeth twice
I
a day.
should think so. I hope so.
there's so much to tune into whilst brushing your teeth. And that's literally it. That's the practice of being mindful whilst doing it. Is what does it sound like when the water is hitting the bristles? What does the toothpaste smell like? What does the toothpaste taste like? What's the sensation of the bristles on my teeth? It's just really like throwing yourself into the experience of brushing your teeth, which sounds really weird because you probably, the reason why we don't remember brushing our teeth and we don't do that is because there's no point. It doesn't make sense to store that information. But when we practice doing that, ultimately, that's how you get mindfulness into your life. You're not always sitting down with your eyes closed meditating.
Well, I think that's what it is that people go into automatic pilot. So, they're
Yeah.
brushing their teeth, they're thinking about paying bills, or they're thinking about going to work, or they're thinking about that issue they've got going on in their own personal life. And then they're actually doing automatic pilot and not thinking about it. Some of my clients, what I've worked with as a therapist, I say to them, change hands. Use
Mm.
the opposite hand. So you have to be more mindful of how you're actually brushing your teeth. So if you're right-handed, change left and vice versa. Then you're actually feeling into your, it's a bit like if you break your wrist or your arm or whatever it is, and or something's happened, you can't use that your regular hand. When you're starting to write or you're doing things, you're really focusing when you're trying to, tie your shoelaces or brush your teeth with the opposite hand because you have to rethink. And it's all the synapses and neurons and everything else going through. It's like retraining that. So that's so important. And I think that's a good sign for people when they are going about their day and they're like, oh, did I do that? Did I do
Yeah.
this? That's a sure sign you're not being mindful in your daily life, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it's not, I don't think the message should be that you should be mindful 100% of the time. Um, I think it's about practicing being mindful so you become more aware of when being in the present moment is important, right? And you will start to realize there's times when you're not present, when you really feel like it would benefit you to be more present. So that might be when you're in a conversation with someone and maybe you're offering them support. It's so easy to kind of let your mind wander, but it's so important to be really engaged with that person at that time to really be a good friend or whatever, a good, if it's someone in your family. So it's about recognizing those times when being more mindful and being more present is important. Um, but yeah, going back to the informal practices, I would say try and identify one thing that you do every day without fail and just do that mindfully. And it doesn't matter how long. So even if you're doing it for like 30 seconds, um, it's just about doing it without fail, and then you'll start to see those changes. Um, go on.
They said, sorry, they just don't stop themselves. They sort of said also about, drinking tea or coffee. It's like taste the tea, they just said, have the relationship with the tea, have the communication with the tea or the coffee or the raisin that you're eating or the food, taste into it, be aware of how it makes you feel. So is that right? Are they on the right track?
Yeah, I was literally just gonna say, yeah, mindful eating is a really classic like informal practice where you um I guess you try and eat each bite like it's the first bite of food you've ever had in your life. So you're like curiously inquiring, what is this on my fork? Thinking about where it came from, all the different people that were involved in getting that, spoonful of rice into your home, onto your spoon. Um, and then the textures in your mouth, the taste, how that changes as you chew it. I think, I definitely have a tendency to chew like maybe like 5 times before I swallow my food. But if I'm doing mindful eating, I'll chew it so many more times. It's a completely different experience. And also I find that I eat about half as much food because I'm full, which doesn't usually happen when I'm inhaling my food. So that's a really good way of kind of introducing something that's really different, and can show you a lot in terms of becoming
And I
more
think what you were saying about feeling really full, because there's that research into saliva and also the time it takes, the amount of chewing, and the brain registers then that you're eating food, and then your digestion goes down, and the way it breaks down your food in your body as well. So there is
yeah.
that, like what you were saying, then you become more fuller, by chewing that little bit longer, really tasting it, really feeling it. Thank you. They just said also memories can be wiped over as well, as in the sense of when you're eating certain foods and you're being more mindful. If there was something you used to hate when you were a child, whatever it was, they'll just throw me some greens or broccoli, whatever it is. But if you start looking at making changes and you want to now start eating broccoli, start rewriting the program to that individual food or whatever it is, the experience to it, they're sort of saying, by being mindful of actually looking at who you are today, because we all change different stages of our lives.
Mm.
Now, Thea, they sort of said they want you to show them sort of an exercise or something they can do. There was something about the breathing one they like. If people would like to participate in that, if you can give them a bit of information, what you'd like to show them now, and that maybe they might want to participate and why we'll be doing it. I think that might be a good idea too.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, we can try like a formal practice. It's called the three-stage breathing, or sometimes called the hourglass breathing. Because it's got three steps. You start with an expansive awareness. So you're kind of just letting things come in and out of your awareness as they please. And then you move into a more narrow focus of awareness on your breath and kind of hold your awareness there. And then you expand it again into the body. So it's really good practice because you're not only doing the kind of formal and takes a little bit of effort to do this kind of practice, but you're also moving your attention around and you're kind of playing with that ability to look at different things and let things enter and leave, and then sustain your attention. So yeah,
I love
if you guys would like to try it,
Yeah, let's have a go. We're here. Come on, guys, let's go for it. No one's watching you. Don't have to worry. If you
that's
think
it.
you turn your camera off if you
Yeah,
want to. Entirely up to you. Don't worry. Me and
that's
Theo.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. So turn your camera off if you want to, like, do whatever you need to do to make it so that's just you in the room. And yeah, I guess it's important to recognize the intention going into this practice, which is to kind of come to it with like a what you might call like a beginner's mind. So we're going to try and experience things that we always experience as if it's happening for the first time. So looking at things with curiosity, and non-judgment as well, trying to leave behind all of the preconceived ideas and understandings that we have. So yeah, I want to invite you to just find a comfortable position, um, maybe one that is not so comfortable that you might fall asleep. So what's quite good is if you sort of come to the edge of your chair, so your back's not supported, if you're sitting down, that's quite a good one. So you're still kind of active. And when you're ready, you can close your eyes if you like to. If you don't want to close your eyes, you can just lower your gaze and soften your attention, your focus. And we're going to start by just grounding ourselves into the moment, into the physical environment around us. So notice your physical posture, notice the way that you're sitting, weight of the legs on the chair, maybe the weight of the feet on the floor, and just noticing any areas of discomfort, maybe some areas feel quite comfortable. Any sensations that might be coming up right now in the body. And just trying to let go of the tendency to want to change things or control things. So if there is that discomfort, try and just see that experience for what it is. Obviously, if it's really uncomfortable, then move. But if you do decide to move, do so mindfully and on purpose rather than falling into the habit of just moving because we're uncomfortable and we don't know why. Just noticing the physical body and the environment around you. Now we can tune into any sounds we might be hearing. So letting any noises just wander into our awareness and wander away. without trying to do the usual thing of imagining what that sound is if we hear it. Try and just listen to the sound for what it is. Maybe it's just a high pitch or a low pitch or a grumble. Noticing any smells in the room. Just grounding yourself in your physical environment. Now we can tune into our internal kind of weather pattern. So any thoughts that might be coming up, like you're kind of tuning into the radio of your mind, just letting the thoughts come up and leave in their own time without judgment. Any emotions, any feelings that might be there, recognizing them, trying not to get swept up in them, and just staying in that seat of observation. Now we want to start to narrow our focus of attention to the breath. So notice the sensation of the breath, the air coming in through the nose or the mouth and out again. Maybe noticing the difference in temperature, the cold air coming in, slightly warmer air coming out. Tuning into the rise and fall of the chest with each inhale and exhale. And see if you can notice where the sensation of the breath is most strong for you. So maybe that's on the tip of the nose. Might be in the belly as it expands and contracts. And just rest your awareness there. And if your mind starts to wander, as it naturally will, just gently bring your awareness back to the breath. Maybe acknowledge where the mind went to. Just bringing back to the breath. Maybe it's becoming harder to keep your focus on the breath at this point. Might be feeling a bit sleepy. That's okay, just making room for those feelings and bringing your attention back to the breath every time it wanders away. Maybe see if you can notice the little space in between each breath, at the top of the inhale before you exhale, and at the bottom of the exhale before you inhale. And again, we're not trying to change the breath at all. We're just leaving it exactly as we found it, letting it be, just noticing. Now we can expand our awareness again into the body, trying to be aware of the body as a whole. So noticing all the sensations from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, all the sensations on the surface of the skin and inside the body as well. Just noticing perhaps how the body is breathing as a whole. Not trying to change anything, making room for your experience. Just letting yourself be exactly as you are, moment to moment. Now we can start to introduce some movement back into the body. So maybe wiggling the toes, wiggling the fingers, maybe stretching any areas of the body that feel like they might need a stretch. Just gently waking the body up again. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back into the room.
So gently coming back into that space, because sometimes we sort of zoom off, or you know how we feel when we come back into the body. So those of you who are working energetically, or you normally go into meditation, please bring yourself back to your feet and the chair that you're on. Really ground yourself. Thank you, Theo. That's been brilliant.